Hey, we're live.
We are.
Episode 19, Entrepreneur Rap. Brett, Regan, David Brickley. It's been a while, man. You've been off making humans.
I have.
So, congratulations once again.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thank you for holding it down for 2 weeks.
Of course. So, a lot to get to. I think a lot of knowledge that you need to be dropping here after 2 weeks out.
That's right.
But what advertisers get right, learning from business mistakes, keeping a balanced perspective, all that and more. Let's hop right into it. When advertisers get it right, I think something came across your Instagram feed yesterday that
it did, and it was nice to see a lot of advertising gone wrong recently. We've seen with the Pepsi commercial, and I think there was some shea butter stuff.
Butter, I didn't see that.
No, you didn't see that one. It's been a traditionally African American product, and they released a new ad campaign that was primarily all white women, and there was some backlash.
Well, then Dove with their soaps now, did you see that?
White is beautiful, or white?
No,
is
it's
something?
like they have bottles based on different women's body shapes, which is odd.
Nice.
A lot of
But I think there's a lot of negative press surrounding when advertisers get it wrong. It's popular to troll, and Pepsi.
Yeah.
Pepsi deserved it, but still, the amount of press surrounding that commercial was insane. Now, I saw something that came across my Instagram feed. It was a sponsored post, and I guess in my mind, I usually think like, sponsored posts, I generally don't want to see them. This commercial, maybe because I'm in the industry and we're looking to go more into that space, but I thought it was one of the best commercials I've seen in many years. I think if this was a Super Bowl ad, it would have been the best one of the year. So I'd love to play it now for the audience. And if you're listening on podcast, start watching live. So this commercial is for the Pandora Premium product, but they've got live sets of a ton of different album covers, from Purple Rain, Starboy, Metallica,
The Weeknd,
Devo.
What album? Yeah, Nirvana. That's what the album is. I love the Drake. I love the Indian too with Chance the Rapper's album, which is pretty dope. Which one's that? Star?
Don't know.
This is Chance the Rapper. This is great. And then Big Sean.
And then ends on Big Sean.
Which I've wondered too, because I know they get paid like 0.002 cents per play or what have you, the artist. But I wonder when it comes to using their likeness and actual commercials for the product, how that works. I'm sure it's an additional fee to use The Weeknd. And
Yeah,
Drake.
I don't know. I mean, it could be something where they, from a PR standpoint, they want to be one of the ones featured. But
Yeah.
for somebody like Drake, everybody could say that about anything for him. But I just thought this was something really cool. They, from concept all the way through execution, it was really well done. And this is an example of an ad that came to me that makes me more likely to buy the product. So now that we're having conversations with some of our clients about, finding a way to do a commercial and setting it up, it kind of makes me think like, hey, we can do, we want to get in the door, but eventually I think we could be producing stuff as good as this and really kind of, taking the cap off.
What do you?
Of what our
So
thoughts are.
there is obviously no voiceover there. There's no text that says anything. No call to action. But when you watch that, I'm just curious. What do you think the call to action is?
So at the very end of the video, it does just say Pandora Premium, and I think there is a CTA, but the CTA from Instagram is click here to see more. At the bottom front.
But I mean, if you were to watch that on television, what are you feeling after you watch that? Like,
I want to get Pandora Premium.
just because
the
all
ad is
the
good.
artists, all the top artists.
Yeah, even if it's just not all the top artists, like all the ones that they've shown, that it's pretty diverse.
Right.
And they went through,
Yeah,
modern
Nirvana
stuff.
to
They've got,
Drake to Weeknd, yeah.
Metallica, Devo.
Rolling Stones.
Yeah, Rolling Stones. So it shows that they, cover a wide breadth, but just a great piece of creative that makes me think that if their creative on a national scale is that good, then their music selection and their user interface is probably pretty good. And I do use Pandora. I don't actually think it's a competitor to Apple Music. I don't think it's a competitor to Spotify.
And I got to tell you, Spotify, I've been using it for, 2 years now, and incredible. But their algorithm, when you go to Spotify radio, is awful.
Yeah, I don't
if
like Apple
Pandora
Music's...
and Spotify were to combine, and Spotify could use Pandora's algorithm, because Pandora is constantly learning from your behaviors of what you're clicking next to, what you thumbs up, and you would really get like every song ends up being something you like from your past or from your genre. And Spotify does a real bad job. If there's a way they can marry the two, it'd be incredible.
Yeah, and if Spotify or Apple Music, and Apple Music has overtaken my use of Spotify because it does the exact same thing and they own the same library. But that's if I want to listen to an album or if I want to hear a specific song. But Pandora has replaced radio. So if I just want to listen to the radio and not have to be on the hook for choosing what I want to listen to, Pandora's way better.
And for Spotify, I just do playlists. So I have like 150 songs that I enjoy. So if you put that on shuffle, you're going to be in a good spot.
But that's the thing. You're not going to find any new music that you may like and didn't know about. But yeah, just wanted to give props to them. Kind of inspired.
To that point, along the same topic, I really appreciate it when companies find a way to use product placement in a really organic way. I hate when you're just, hey, buy this, like right to your face. I think it's lazy. And when I knew you were going to bring up this topic, I wanted to come with one of my own. And this is something that came across during the NBA playoffs. Inside the NBA always does a pretty good job of integrating sponsorship in an organic way. But Auntie, I'll have you pull this up. This is Inside the NBA. Really, it's a Fitbit ad, but the way they do it is super organic and not in your face. And I thought it was pretty cool.
He's running.
He don't run steps. He walks
all night long. Would you like
the steps you got, Hal?
We put the time lapse camera on, Hal. So you're beginning at 6:25 after the pregame show.
Are we going to do it in slow motion? Wow.
This is all time
So
lapse.
you count that as working out?
No, I'm just saying steps, man.
Count your steps. Are we not going to speed it up?
Oh, there we go. Back and forth and back and forth and back.
No,
and forth.
Now, is he trying to do this
Yes,
for
he
the
does.
total number of steps, or this is his normal routine?
After every quarter, he's giving me box
If
scores.
he did that, he comes down after every quarter?
Yes.
So
all the
he's
time.
been down there 8 times
Wow.
tonight?
He's
More
all
than
over
that.
the place. Oh, meantime, here's Chuck.
Yeah, look at him. Oh, look at him. Ordering food again. Ordering food again. I sit next to you. Yeah, look at him. Yeah. Are you kidding me? Look at me and Shaq moving around. Not move. Yeah, look at him. I'm working, man. Yeah, I know you're working.
The most exercise you got was taking the headphones on and off.
Come on, man.
Come on, man.
You was working all right. Look at it.
All right.
Looking in that midget.
Hal with 7,300 steps to 816 for the Chuckster.
Dude.
Covering almost four and a half.
Yeah, smart.
Minus 3 floor
Almost
times.
4.5 miles.
I wanted to tell you, man, but ain't nothing sacred around here. What are this, WikiLeaks? A bunch of Edward Snowdens around here.
That I thought that was really well done. I mean, obviously, when you have a personality like Charles Barkley, it's easy kind of to make fun of him and find a way to incorporate. But you don't look at that like, buy Fitbit, $129 at your local Best Buy. Like, it's not. And it's funny, but you take away with like, I kind of want to get a Fitbit potentially.
Yeah.
So
And I like the
thought it was
fact
smart.
that they weren't actually exercising. It was just during their routine to be able to track what they're doing all day.
Yeah, and it works within the show. I mean, that segment would have worked with Fitbit or without Fitbit, as they make fun of Chuck a lot. So, yeah, finding ways to incorporate sponsorship, especially now, you're going to have to find more and more ways to have that product placement in order to get in front of people. So, all right, so learning from business mistakes.
Oh, man, we've made a lot of them.
Yeah.
And I love reading articles from investors or other people when they talk about big misses. I think there's some infamous big misses that you can think of.
Warren Buffett and Google, right?
Yeah, Warren Buffett and Google. Time Warner AOL merger was a huge business mistake. I've heard from Vayner and a few other people. Vaynerchuk passed on Airbnb, I believe, because he felt
And
like
Uber.
Uber.
Travis was one of his friends too.
And he's mentioned that a lot of times. That's partially what drives him, because he couldn't even imagine, the amount of money that came from that. I was watching a documentary recently where the founder of Atari, his name escapes me, but Steve Jobs worked for him at one point and came to him and said, do you want 30% of Apple for 50 grand or something absurd, and he passed on it. So you can't even count the return on investment that would have come from something like that. So I think it's kind of helpful to go back and look at past business mistakes. And yesterday we were having a conversation where we were looking back towards all the employees that were here, and for the people that did leave, why they left, and in certain circumstances,
essentially every employee we've ever hired who got fired, who left on their own,
right,
who's still here, obviously.
But in looking back at that, I think that there was a couple things that I saw where we recognize now we do things differently because of those experiences.
Yep.
And then in talking with one of our new biz dev hires, talking about some of the packages that we offered in the early stages of our company, that was a business mistake that thank God no one said yes to, because it really would have been hard for us to keep up with. So I kind of wanted to just wrap back and forth a little bit on some of what we thought were mistakes.
One, just to be completely transparent, I think the first NBA team we pitched, $1,000 a month, and we were trying to do a year deal, lock them in.
Yep.
And the idea was 30 pieces of original content. So that could be a social graphic, it could be an infographic, it could be a short video. But for $1,000, you would get 30 pieces of content.
And at that time, written articles was still part of that.
So you can have us interview somebody and transcribe the article.
So we could have been on the hook for an article a day every single day for $1,000.
But this was when there was 3 people, just the owners of the company were there. And we're trying to just get our first couple deals. But we look back at those situations like, well, and the Houston Rockets, no disrespect, but bad job by them. I mean, they would have been in gold mine there for a year.
Yep.
Because that would have been a lot of cool content, one per day essentially every single month. And they didn't take it. So like you mentioned, if 5 NBA teams, so let's do it. We would have been doing backflips like, yeah, our business is going great. We're making $5,000 a month, but we would be
getting paid
trouble.
less than minimum wage and working
19
dogs.
hours a day. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a mistake. And I also think from a pricing strategy scenario, we priced it so low that it didn't seem valuable. And that's why I think people wound up passing on it.
There's got to be a catch.
Well, and, I showed you something yesterday from Design Pickle, which is coming up sponsored on all my feeds, but it's unlimited graphic design for all your marketing for $379. It's like, it's going to be garbage. It has to be, because there's no way to get good stuff for that cheap.
Or there's
some
96-hour SLAs or something.
So I think, a couple of the topics that we touched on yesterday was one of the mistakes we made early is when we hired people, we really didn't have a clear expectation or list of
job roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, like when you start this job, here's what we expect from you, and this is how we'll consider you being successful in the role. Because we were growing so fast, we would bring people in, and then anything that we wanted them to do, we'd have them do.
Yeah.
And I think that was frustrating for some of the early employees.
Yeah, and I think, when you look at it, Monday morning quarterback or hindsight being 2020, it's like, how could you not have at least a half sheet of a couple of job responsibilities? But I think in business, like anything else, you just really don't learn some of those lessons until you go through it, make the mistake, and then say, we got to find a way to not do this anymore.
Well, and in the really early stages, it's very hard to do because your day-to-day is so different.
You can't stop and think and like, hey, how can I make this better?
And so Mac, one of our earliest designers that we brought on, who was really instrumental in some of the early projects, but what he did when he started versus what he did 6 months later was far and away just totally different.
And that's startup business in a nutshell.
But his role really did change.
I think one thing too, outside of business, outside of roles and responsibilities, is just overall onboarding. I think one thing we've done just very recently, and again, this is not stuff that we are so smart and we think of it ourselves, but just like welcoming a new member of the team. Now we do something where when you go to your desk, you have your laptop, your new phone, potentially an STN polo, an STN coffee mug, an STN t-shirt, and it's a little thing. There's also a note from everybody that says, like, welcome to the team, can't wait to get started, and talks about how your first day is going to go. That little gesture, I think, when you first walk in is so much better than, again, some of our original employees were, like, shoved in a corner. Like, hey, just shadow John for 2 hours, and he'll kind of give you the ropes, and, yeah, the bathroom's over there, and it's kind of like, maybe you left a job, or maybe you picked us over somebody else, and you come in those first couple of days like, did I make a mistake? I kind of feel weird. I don't know anybody. Nobody's talking to me. And then Chris did something really cool. One of our newer employees said, hey, you should have like a 2 truths, 1 lie type of deal, just to kind of open it up and not make it
break the ice with the entire staff.
So we've done that too with Lise and Will, so our 2 newest employees. And I think it's cool. It's not awkward. It's not like, let's go around the room and tell everybody what we do and a fun fact about you. It just kind of opens it up. So those are things that I think people walk in day one thinking that we were the visionaries behind those, but it's just a lot of reading and a lot of, trial and error, really.
Yeah, and you would think in hindsight that it was intuitive to have all of those things, but it's really not. I think when we came up with the concept of like, let's have some stuff on the desk, it's because we saw somebody's picture on Twitter, and they were like, great way to start, and it had all this stuff.
And
we were already giving a lot of the stuff to these people, maybe not the swag, the polos, and the coffee mugs, but, you know, people would come, they'd have a new computer, and they'd have a nice desk, and they'd have a phone, and it just wasn't presented in a nice way. So presenting it in that fashion, and then, like you mentioned, just an onboarding in general.
Training.
Because we had one person who maybe wasn't going to be a good fit long-term anyway because we were hiring in a rush, but there was zero onboarding. You and I were not in the office at all. They started, and we really didn't have a great communication with anybody who was going to train her.
Yeah, and you added someone to your sales department, if you will, recently, and you're like, I'm not even going to mess with this until I come back from vacation. I think in the early stages, like, let's get them started. You know, I'll get them up and running, and by the time we can hit the ground running, but we're like, let's just push it out a few more weeks, so that way when day one, he could be useful, and we can have all the training procedures down. Yeah. Going back to hire slow, fire fast, but also like don't bring a person on until you're ready to officially onboard them, I think is super important.
Yeah, but you know, I do think it is important to talk to other business owners, read other books from business owners, and totally be, you know, open to trying new things, because there's certain things that we do now that in the beginning of the company we were like, we don't want to be like that. We used to say that about contracts, where we didn't want to have like, we don't want to have like, there's this many revisions. We didn't want to be like Yard House, where it was like there's all these rules and everything, and now we realize the value in that, and it's actually not just like, that's dorky. It gives structure to the company, and it makes it actually feel like a business rather than just a bunch of people
running
trying
around
to figure it out, and there's no answers to questions. So being able to just kind of...
And I always say, like, to get better at doing pull-ups, you have to do a lot of pull-ups, and it's like, to get better at business, you have to run a business and you know, be able to be self-aware enough to look at things like that was pretty silly. Why are we doing that? Let's do it a different way.
And I think that's a great segue into our next topic, which is delegation is a muscle.
I like that.
So we've been talking about delegation a lot as we scale. Not only are we delegating, but people that are on the management team,
which is relatively new. I mean, 6
are
weeks
learning
old.
to delegate as well. And it really is something that you have to exercise. It's not intuitive, especially after, 3 years plus of you and I doing like every single thing.
And I always say this, entrepreneurs are type A personalities anyway, so you want to be able to control stuff, and I'll just do it. I don't trust anybody, like that type of deal. So I think any entrepreneur that starts a company, that's always a difficult thing to start handing stuff off. Yeah.
And there's no chance of scaling ever if you can't really learn to delegate. And Google has, they say the 3 most important words at Google is train and delegate. And
so
I think
and catches
and counts.
Oh, yeah.
Train and delegate.
I was ready for 3 adjectives.
So I really do. I think, when you begin to delegate, it starts out pretty weak and you've got to exercise it. And for me personally, it was really awkward for me to start delegating initially. And the first delegation became that.
What's to your boy?
To you, where you started to say, look, from the sales side, once it's closed, let's try to separate that.
Yeah.
Because what was happening is, since I was sales, I would be there through the life of the contract. I was the one who was delivering the content.
You would reach out, you would sell, you would onboard them, you would kick off call, and then you would start.
And even though we were collabing in it, oftentimes it was my email that was the primary, point of contact to any of our clients. Yeah. And at a certain point, there was, 10, 15 clients all being serviced by Brett, the guy who sold it, and you were in my email, and that became like the generic accounts account.
And you couldn't halfway through, now I'm going to throw you over to, I guess we could have, but we felt so awkward. It felt like,
And there were certain occasions where there was so much going on with the actual project that was occurring. There were times where I'd be on a plane ride back from an event, and I'm trying to close the next deal and sending contracts on the plane, and that isn't necessarily sustainable. But it wasn't until this year, the first on-site project that I didn't attend was NBA All-Star, and then shortly followed by San Francisco Giants. Yeah. And for me, it felt like I sold it. Isn't it disrespectful for me not to be there? And that's how I felt, but I knew in my head, no, it's not. They don't care if Brett shows up. They want to make sure that the final product is great. And as long as we've got people, you happen to be there for the All-Star one, so I felt confident. But for San Francisco Giants, neither you or I were on site for
yeah.
that project, and it was a big deal. That was a project we'd been working on for
And
a
you were
long
even
time
thinking
to get.
like the week leading up to, like, they might, fly out there at 6 a.m. and be on site. Yeah.
And even though mentally I knew, like, there has to be a cutoff, there has to be a project where we just let it go, but
that took 3.5 years.
It's still emotionally,
Yep.
I felt like I needed to be there. So,
And it's got to be weird from a sales standpoint too. Like, you potentially are emailing people and talking with them for a 6 month, maybe a 9 month, even a year. You're chatting with someone, then finally you close that deal, and then you have to go, here you go, David, and then on to the next one, which has got to be, it's kind of weird. It's almost like, I don't know, working the phones and making a reservation at a restaurant and then not being able to go have the dinner, essentially.
But me over the last, I'd say, year, really pulling away from the execution of projects. And, what's tough about that is sometimes I'll have an opinion on something, and maybe I think that I want to step in and say something about it, but I'm like, hey, if that was my project and somebody who wasn't involved in it came in to step in, so I just need to step back.
And it goes
sometimes.
both ways, too. I might have a thing on sales or the way we're pitching someone. It's like, I got to let Brett do his thing. That's his lane.
So I do think I've done a good job of stepping back from the account side, but I can tell it's going to be hard letting go of sales. It's going to be hard getting to the point where somebody else is starting a conversation, going through the opportunity stage, closing a deal, sending the contract, following up, and I'm not involved. That's going to feel weird, but once we get to that point, then the scale is infinite.
Yeah. And to be transparent for me, like, I feel it's kind of weird. I feel somewhat guilty sometimes to delegate tasks, and I've noticed about myself, and I have to get better at it. But, listen, we have over 20 employees now, and we're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in salary. So I think you have to be realistic, and it shouldn't be pompous to say, hey, we have a huge staff now, so I probably shouldn't be taking out the trash, or I probably shouldn't be scheduling all my meetings, or I probably shouldn't call the plumber if the toilet overflows. I could, of course I can. I'm capable of that. But I still deal with that a little bit, where it's like, I don't want to ask him. That's kind of messed up. But it's like, well, why is it messed up? Because I'm not a person to ever like pat myself on the back or say how well I'm doing or be proud of myself, really. So I do kind of feel like, in some cases, we're all on the same team, and like I kind of feel I'm putting somebody out, but that's what they're here for. Like, we hired them for a reason because they're really smart and they can do things for us. So why not give them that? And additionally, I've used this analogy a lot, but I think we have to start looking at it, and business owners overall have to almost look at yourself as an hourly rate. I think Brett and David, again, might sound arrogant, but whatever, we're $1,500 an hour. We don't charge people that, but in theory, let's say every time we work on something for an hour, it's costing the company $1,500. Well, in that case, I don't think we should spend an hour putting together an IKEA desk, because if you could find somebody for 18 to do that, or you can find somebody for 20 or whatever, that just saves the company money overall. Because if we are to pat ourselves on the back, for the last 4 years, we built a company, and it's grown over time every single year at a pretty fast rate. So I think we have to find ways to be in situations where we're focused on growing the company the way we know how to, more so than the other tasks that we've hired people to do.
Yeah.
So,
and one of the jobs that A, I want to do, and B, I think is really important for business owners, is to think. You got to think about ways to expand in new areas.
Exactly.
You got to think about ways to develop company culture.
Because as an owner of a company,
there has to be time for that.
If you're successful as an owner of a company and you have 20 or so employees and you're increasing revenue every year, your biggest asset is your ability to think and adjust and come up with different business initiatives. It's not putting together the IKEA desk.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So I think you have to find ways to like delegate, and that's a silly example probably, but delegate the things. And even like Isabella has been huge. Every single time someone emails us, like, let's find a time, we forward it to Isabella, like, hey, Isabella's going to find a great time for our calendar, because that can take
5 to 10 hours a week, I would say.
Yeah.
Could have been spent on that. Because I'm.
How about Wednesday? How about Thursday? Oh, you can't do Thursday, 1 o'clock? Actually, can we do 4 Eastern? And it just becomes this like ever going.
Yeah.
So even that little small change, again, it could save 25% of your work week, which if you can spend that 25% on thinking of new initiatives, it's a game changer.
Agreed.
Keeping a balanced perspective. So I've been obviously watching the NBA since I was 5 years old. It's kind of like that pastime, if you will. I think I have one of my best friends I met when I was 5, obviously my family. But other than that, it's been like NBA basketball. I've always watched it. I've always had favorite teams. So even at 30 years old, to like go home and turn on the playoffs, it's kind of like to watch Barkley and Inside the NBA and stuff. I just have always done that. So it's kind of somewhat, I I guess, a cool thing or something that kind of puts me at ease. But a couple of things happened with the NBA playoffs, and I don't know if you caught on to some of these stories, but Isaiah Thomas, he plays for the Boston Celtics. Pretty much the morning before his game, his 21-year-old sister tragically died in a car accident. And they actually had him at shoot-around breaking down, crying. They weren't sure if he was going to play. Additionally, Patrick Beverley, the point guard for the Houston Rockets, he found out on the way to the arena that his grandmother passed away. Again, had the camera on him. He's crying. He's trying to compose himself. And then Kenny the Jet Smith, who you've met from Turner Sports, and I've had a chance to interview him as well. His mother recently passed away, so he took some time away from the playoffs and the set to go to the funeral and make all that happen. And I know you and I have had some close calls with some immediate family members in the last 2 years or so. But again, that stuff just always keeps me balanced and has that perspective, because I think in business, a deal may not go through or an employee may not be pulling through. And it sounds morbid to say, but I really do think when you hear stories like that of somebody's sister dying in a car accident, or you hear someone's mother dying, that would be a very dark, depressed state. So I think I use it as motivation, man. When I hear that, I'm so thankful that my family is with me and that everything's good. And it really gives you perspective in business. When that deal doesn't come through, it's like, all right, on to the next one. What's the worst that can happen type deal?
Yeah. And I think by doing that, you can really look at your priorities in general, but I think it makes you a better business overall, because if you understand that this business is important, but maybe not the most important thing, because if, all of your family gets wiped out in a car accident or something like that, well, then this business just doesn't make you happy. So I do think that's important, and it helps from, keeping a balanced perspective, helps you from becoming too cutthroat when you make bad business decisions, because the business is everything.
Right.
And if you screw over 2 or 3 or 4 people because you think the business is everything, you get a bad reputation, your clients don't like you, and they feel like they're getting screwed, and then all of a sudden it's just not the reputation we want to have. And
well, more so than that, I just think there's a lot of people that complain about, I had traffic when I came in, and this freaking deal that I was certain was going to come through didn't come through, and the stupid ass client did this and that, and I don't know, man, just an awful day. Nothing could go any worse today. Really?
Yeah.
And maybe that's I'll get a little older, I guess. But that, and also things that I think about a friend sometimes, and I think about a good time, or I think about a good quality they may have, and now I just try to pick up the phone and text them and say, hey, man, thinking about you. You're always so cool to hang out with, whatever. And you would think that would come off across hey, man, is everything okay? What's going on? But actually, people enjoy that and being able to reflect and say nice things as well. So I guess I'm becoming more cerebral in my...
Yeah, no, it's good, man. Keep a positive attitude and realize that, the negative stuff's not that bad.
All right, so kind of a fun one here. Top movies for entrepreneurs. I want to see if you've seen these. This is from Mashable.
Probably not.
I think you have. So The Social Network is on here.
I have seen it.
That's a good movie for... Citizen Kane, 1941, which I saw in school, but I forget the whole plot.
It's supposed to be the best movie on, but every time I see it on Netflix, I'm like, maybe later.
Yeah. Joy, 2015, Jennifer Lawrence.
Didn't see it.
Experience her own challenges and family return.
This was it was like the QVC lady who invented a mop.
Yeah.
Heard it was pretty good, or at least she was nominated for something for it.
1976, a classic, Rocky, of course, talking about entrepreneurs or underdogs rising to the challenge. Pursuit of Happiness, which I thought was really good. Will Smith and his kid.
I've seen clips.
He's literally sleeping in a bathroom with his kid and living as a homeless person, then becomes a high-profile stock guy. Moneyball.
I've read Moneyball.
Oh, you haven't watched it?
I have not.
It's a great movie. The Man in His Dream. Jerry Maguire.
Love it.
The Aviator. Lorenzo's Oil and Steve Jobs. I've watched 6 or 7 of those.
Lorenzo's Oil. Never heard of it.
Lorenzo's Oil, film critic Roger Ebert sums it up perfectly. It takes a heartbreaking story and pushes it to the limit, showing us the lengths of courage and imagination that people can summon when they must. A true story of Augusto and Michaela O'Done. A Cure for ALD.
Okay.
Whatever. But
I'd actually like to add one to that list.
I have a couple too.
So I watched The Founder.
That's Ray Kroc, right?
Yeah.
I think I put that on the list. I want to watch that.
It's really good.
Yeah. And Social Network, too, you come away with it. If you are a business owner, it makes you start thinking, wait a second.
I don't know if I looked at that from a business perspective at all. I looked at
that as more
I looked at that as more of a soap opera.
But co-founders, lawsuits, and isolation, and all that stuff.
I
mean,
didn't think there was a lot of business knowledge to be gained from it. It just seemed like more of a.
I guess you could appreciate it though as a business owner, like going through all that madness when he started the company.
Yeah.
So I have The Big Short, like not really business, but it just kind of makes you start thinking on a different level, in my opinion. And then Thank You for Smoking. You ever see that movie? The great Nick Naylor.
I feel like I have seen it because I can see images of it, but I don't really remember.
It's great to like be able to twist words from I think PR people would really love that, but that's a really good movie too.
Yeah. Yeah, but if the founder is fantastic. Michael Keaton was really good in it, and it was just an interesting story about.
Do you come away motivated after you watch it?
Yeah, in a certain sense, just like scaling like crazy.
What about Steve Jobs too? Did you ever watch that?
I watched, I think, some of the Ashton Kutcher one, and I don't know. I think that was just called Jobs.
No, I watched the one.
And then there
Michael
was the Steve Jobs.
Fassbender.
No, I didn't see it.
It was pretty deep, but it just shows that, like, to your point, he wasn't really thinking about family or his daughter. It was all about like being the best he can be in business. But then he realized towards the end, like, it doesn't really matter if you don't have a solid family unit at the end of the day. So
yeah, but there's a lot of great movies. I do think. I lost my train of thought.
How about Remember the Titans? One of my favorite movies of all time. That's
just more like
team building,
generally
people.
Inspirational type movie.
Always inspired when I watch that. All right, so we have a new most retweeted tweet of all time. We talked about this a couple podcasts ago, but of course, Wendy's and the
give that social media manager a raise.
Carter Wilkerson, the guy who asked, "How many retweets do I need for free chicken nuggets?" Wendy's says 18 million, but they gave it to him anyway because he got the #1 tweet. So this is the tweet that he got the #1 tweet on. Of course, 18 million. So what does that say? 3.52 million retweets. It beat out, of course, as we talked about last show, Ellen, which is the next one, Auntie. And that was, I think, at the Emmys, right? But that has 3.4. What was the last one that we just saw?
Do you know what the potential reach of that tweet was?
I don't.
400 gazillion.
Yeah.
Because it's a fake
and
number.
And then, of course, this is the latest from Wendy's. So Twitter sent a certificate over to the great Carter, and he's now the most retweet tweet of all time. They said that's good for nuggets and $100,000 to DTFA. Consider it done.
Can't wait for Jeopardy in 17 years where I can answer nugs for Carter.
Do you think this was all a stunt?
No. I don't think they paid for
Not
this.
paid, but
I don't think they reached out to him first and asked him to do it. And the reason why I don't think
because they ended
so
up having a
because
website, nugsforcarter.com, and all that. Like
all of that afterwards, I think they capitalized well. But Wendy's has been consistent
Social listening.
over the last 6 months or so of like roasting or being snarky with their audience.
Yep.
And this isn't even the first Wendy's tweet that's gone quote unquote viral. There's been a few other ones where people would ask, "Oh, hey, I'm going to McDonald's. What should I get?" And they say, a vaccine or something like that. So they've been pretty good about going back and forth on those. And this one just happened to catch fire because there was an actual retweet goal to be had, and Carter could win something for it. So I think it was just they had a good strategy. Wendy's,
I don't even want to know how many articles have been written about this thing. I mean, it has to be thousands upon thousands of free PR. I've seen it everywhere.
Well, and
The Verge, Variety, Mashable, Adweek, Ad Age.
Every business is going to be like, guys, we need a Wendy's.
This is the
moment. Like, let's
Oreo
try to
blackout type of PR stunt.
Yeah,
I mean,
in the same way that I think every creative director is trying to find the fearless girl activation from Wall Street, because that was the other activation that got a ton of press. Mm-hmm. But no, I do think this was organic, and that's why it worked. And it worked with the Wendy's audience because they had a voice for at least 6 months to a year that was on that same tone. So good for them. It's
and that's the thing about community management and social listening overall. If you do 1,000 tweets, it's probably not going to do too much. But the one like that, if you're around to be able to capitalize. And what was it with Beyonce when she dropped the Lemonade album? Was it Domino's she talks about?
No, it was Red Lobster.
Yeah. And everybody would just clown a Red Lobster for 24 hours. Like, how are
and
you
then
not?
They came back and they were like, yeah, try our Cheddar Bay biscuits. And then everyone was like, no.
You're awful.
No.
Yeah. So that's the difference between, I guess, investing in a social strategy and not investing in a social strategy.
I do think, though, there are going to be academic case studies on this that'll look at conversion. Because out of all of this press, how many people now are like, yeah, I'll go to Wendy's more, or I'll go to Wendy's at all, because of the press that they're getting here. And I think there'll be some sort of brand lift.
Yeah.
But that's where it's hard to go direct from social to what that bump is.
Even if
but
in the
they
back
look at quarter over quarter, year over year, and right now people are attending and going to Wendy's.
Well, just
and
the
buying
cool
more.
fact, do you think Wendy's is cooler than McDonald's right now?
Cool, sure.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So before we get into our quote of the week, I know we wanted to talk a little bit about this whole Stephen Colbert thing, the FCC investigation, where he made a joke in his monologue about Trump.
Yes.
And
So I guess there's two lines of thought where my brain went on this, but I'll give a little bit of background for those listening. Trump, during one of his monologues last week, Colbert, referring to Trump, said the only thing your mouth is good for is being Vladimir Putin's blank holster, referring to male anatomy.
I think you can cuss.
Well, that's part of my other thing is I'm going to put the blank in there. We'll have it beeped.
All right.
So it was bleeped during the broadcast. And after people heard this, there was a trending hashtag on Twitter that was Fire Colbert. And a lot of the people were claiming that the Fire Colbert hashtag wasn't ostensibly for the fact that he was insulting the president. It was because it was homophobic, the comment. So what really made this more of a national news story is that Ajit Pai, I believe is how you pronounce his name, who is the chair of the FCC, said that they were investigating the complaint. That turned it into this huge thing. The FCC is investigating, but anytime there's a complaint, the FCC is mandatorily has to investigate.
Much like when the whole Timberlake, Janet Jackson situation happened, they had to investigate.
Yeah, but I mean, if I called in to complain about anything, like if there's enough complaints, you have to investigate. So it wasn't as if the FCC had a personal vendetta against Stephen Colbert. But I thought of this in a couple different ways. From a political standpoint, I think everyone would agree that Stephen Colbert has been a, mouthpiece for the left. First as Stephen Colbert, the kind of satire right wing. Bill
O'Reilly, really.
A fake Bill O'Reilly that was making fun of the opinions of the right. And now as more of a straightforward, actually being himself, but still very much left-leaning liberal, attacking Trump and the right. Now, if in certain circumstances, the left can be pretty aggressive in attacking people for being insensitive, overall homophobic, xenophobic. If there is a comment made about Caitlyn Jenner, people get up in arms and are very aggressive. And I'm not sure if this was really homophobic, but I think that's certain circumstances where the left really can't say well, it's Colbert, so he gets a pass on saying this because he's on our side. It really needs to be equitable across the board. And I think, this is maybe an example where if Bill O'Reilly had said something like this, or Milo Jovovich, or whatever you say his last name, the left could have attacked, him for being homophobic, but when it's Colbert, it kind of seems like that's a little too politically correct for some people. So
yeah, but I feel like Bill O'Reilly, Stephen Colbert is a comedian. A late night talk show host, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, they're comedians. So I think the problem is jokes are birthed from the same place, whether it's a great joke or a bad joke. And I think we have to find a way to protect that free speech ability, because when Colbert has said 10,000 jokes in his lifetime, so most of them have been fine and have not. But I think anytime someone says maybe the joke was a bad joke. It was just a joke that didn't go over well. It was insensitive. But he was trying to make people laugh. That's what he did. And the entire crowd laughed on the set. There wasn't anybody that went, ooh.
And he's certainly playing to his audience.
But to fire, hashtag fire Colbert because he said a joke that may have been a little on the edge. I think we're getting really down a murky road and a slippery slope of let's not have comedy at all, because you know what? Dave Chappelle had quite a bit of jokes about OJ, Bill Cosby, and rape in his last special. So let's just not have Dave Chappelle anymore. So I don't know. I think that the PC cops are just everywhere now. It's getting kind of scary.
Yeah, but I think that's on both sides, and this is one of the occasions where it's going. But I don't know if there's that big of a difference in comedy if it's like a late night show like that. If you're in a comedy club or something like that or doing a special, but a late night show is it's network television. It's, aired for free to the entire United States.
So what should happen? He should be fired?
No, I don't agree with that. I think it's a totally fine joke. I didn't really, I don't think of it as homophobic. I think most of the Fire Colbert hashtag was probably done by people who were offended that he said it about Trump at all, and then
tried to use that as
the fact that it was quote unquote homophobic as a reason to fire him,
right?
As kind of like an irony, like, oh, that's homophobic. But I think it was probably
now Bill O'Reilly.
I don't think it was the gay community that was really up in arms about it.
If Bill O'Reilly has 7 different women coming in alleging that he sexually harassed them, that's a little bit different. That's when I think you fire somebody if he's paid over $18 million in settlements. When someone, again, I don't think the joke was that great. And again, you could probably say it's kind of on the line. That's a little bit homophobic or what have you. But I do think you have to protect the ability to, hey, I said a joke. People there laughed. Some people got really offended. My bad. Came from the same place.
So that was the political side of it that I saw. From a business side, this is something that we talked about in a previous episode. While I was out of the office, we had someone come in and do sexual harassment training. But how does sexual harassment training work at a place like the Colbert Show?
That was my question to them.
That is really... I mean,
Howard Stern show specifically.
If you're a female in that room and you're part of that joke writing session and then that goes up on, and you're a producer or whatever, could you not very easily say, hey, this makes me uncomfortable?
I have an answer for you.
Okay.
So I asked the sexual harassment trainer that came in that exact question. Playboy Radio on Sirius XM. How to have the best sex of your life, and they go into it. So if you have an intern sitting there or like an employee, couldn't they say like, this topic made me feel uncomfortable and I feel like da-da-da-da. They said in your employment agreements and also in your employee handbooks, you say we talk about stuff. Because, I mean, we had swastikas all over our computers for 1 week because we were working on we were working on a TV show that had a bunch of Nazi memorabilia around or whatever. And that could be super... someone could get very sensitive to that and not want to be around that. So
triggered
with our employee agreements and handbooks, there has to be a line like you may be working on content that may be offensive or may make you feel a certain way. If so, you need to contact the manager immediately and be off the
But that just doesn't hold up. If somebody wants to go and say, hey, I felt uncomfortable, because you could.
I think if you're in a court of law, though, like you work for Playboy Radio and you're saying that you're feeling uncomfortable because you're talking about sex, like you need to get another job. That's fine. That's
right.
their
But
lane.
then where's that line? Because I'm sure if you work for Playboy and your boss is doing some sort of sexual harassment or talking about it something vulgar, and you feel like it crosses a line, they can't just go like, hey, man, it's just Playboy.
They say there's a difference in the meeting that we had. The difference between touching, obviously making a legitimate approach to somebody, and also just I'm offended because I heard something. So there is at least that separation where, because anybody could be offended by anything. You're wearing a blue shirt. That's, a Crip wears blue, and my dad got murdered by.
I'm crippin'.
You know what I'm saying? I'm seriously though. Like anybody could be offended by anything. So if that was the line, then you would be in lawsuits every single day.
But you even talked about like, I don't want to talk about politics in the office because somebody could be offended. Mm-hmm. But I mean, that's the line too, where I feel like, well, I want to be able to have a, conversation about what's going on in politics and not feel like in my own business I can't say like, did you hear about what Trump did? What is your opinion?
Yeah, but
on
as a business owner and you're in the back of the room and there's 15 people working away and you're talking about how you think Trump is a moron.
Well, I mean, I think there's also like being professional in general,
but even just
topics that you can't touch.
I think Trump's done a pretty good job this week. I think a lot of people give him a lot of heat, but he's doing a good job. Again, especially this election, the word Donald Trump can make people turn everything off that you're saying and get very agitated.
I feel the same way about if I went out to David Furker right now and I'm like, hey man, how you feel about the Chargers being in Los Angeles? That may be something that like truly offends him. Or if you were going back and forth.
But then it gets back to do you like it when your employees are offended?
Right, but I also don't want to just like have certain topics that are totally off limits.
But that's
100%.
That's a culture thing, but B, if 2 of the 20 employees actually truly get offended, maybe unjustly so, or they don't really have a lot of reason to do, but they do. You have to make the decision, even though it sucks or you think it's dumb. You want to be able to talk politics. If it really, truly, puts 2 people not at ease, then I think you have to make that decision.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I think
those are the slippery slope things of like. It almost seems like the way that initially sexual harassment and other types of harassment are presented is not about harassment. It's about the topic. Period. Like if that topic is brought up in any fashion, then it can be considered harassment. So it really is like tough. I think some of our employees even
not harassment, but again, it comes down to like if someone's uncomfortable just because they feel uncomfortable, whether you're talking about religion, politics, sports, whatever, for whatever reason. If you talk about the Chargers in front of Furker here, and he gets really upset and he's turning red and he's getting angry, like And that happens with a lot of friends. There's some friends of yours, I'm sure, that like, hey, man, don't talk about my girl like that. Don't talk about my sister like that. You're like, that's pretty irrational. I'm just joking. But you stop if you respect that person and don't want to irritate them. So I think if there's a line where you could offend a lot of people, then you probably should, whether you think it's rational or not, probably step back.
See how it goes.
All right. So quote of the week. I'll let you go first.
Quote of the week is from Elon Musk. I talk about him a lot. Pretty amazing dude. So this quote goes as such: "My proceeds from the PayPal acquisition were $180 million. I put $100 million in SpaceX, $70 million in Tesla, and $10 million in Solar City. I had to borrow money for rent." So I think it's pretty evident why that quote is awesome. That's a guy who's completely all in. If it was me, maybe set aside $1 million or something like that. So you're not borrowing money from people. But he really did. I mean, there was certain circumstances where when SpaceX was on the brink of failure and Tesla was having some serious problems, that was everything he'd ever worked for. And he could have sailed off into the sunset. $180 million is enough to do just about anything you want.
Yeah, but he doesn't feel that he's being... His worth as a human being is constantly pushing the limits and be able to make an impact. So
right, but I mean,
180 million on a beach, he would have been miserable. So
right, but how about 100? How about 100 million in SpaceX and then 80 million for yourself? Like to go all in on 3 different things. To start any one of these companies would be incredibly challenging, and the risk factor is there. I mean, SpaceX, their stated goal is to put a man into Mars.
Well, and I think some people too, they only feel motivated if their back's against the wall too. So I think he probably somewhat, backed himself into a corner a little bit, so he didn't have that. Well, I got 80 million in the bank, so if SpaceX, if we crash a rocket, it's fine. Like every decision, because I think you and I bootstrapping the company, that was an incredible thing that we were able to do, because it just makes you, every decision is money out the door. So you have to really, have a lot of backing of your decision.
And I will say, I do know from following what he did, it wasn't like PayPal sold 170, 10.
No. But
it
the idea
was
is there.
Like SpaceX needed the funding at a certain point, and he was like, all right, I'll be the one to do it, because they did take on, investors, and there was certainly a lot of capital that was put into those companies. But when it was time to step up, he used his own money and then really did have to use every penny to get things going.
Without knowing it, I think if you listen to all 19 of our podcasts, there's a few themes that always come up. Elon Musk, Amazon, Jeff Bezos. Those guys always come up.
Yeah, I mean, they're the top 2.
Ryan Seacrest gets thrown in there.
But if you're really talking about, world-changing, shifting things, it's Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, it's true.
I think those 3 guys, if you look in 100 years, you'll look back and go, oh, Facebook is the company that beams internet to the entire world, and SpaceX.
And you and I talk about him a lot.
That's how you go to Mars.
The underrated
and
dude that entrepreneurs should get a lot of inspiration from is Ryan Seacrest. There was this tweet that came out. It said part of the unemployment problem in the country is Ryan Seacrest has most of the jobs.
Yeah.
But I mean, this guy just got the former Regis and Kelly show, so with Kelly, so he's now the official co-host. American Idol just got bought by ABC. And then, of course, we know Keeping Up with the Kardashians, Kiss FM, iHeartRadio, the whole deal. So
yeah, and my favorite thing about him, and possibly this is just my rejection of so many entrepreneurs on social right now being inspirational, but I haven't heard him do an interview about hustling or any of that other crap.
He just does it.
He just does it. There's not a lot of fanfare around it. He really doesn't do that many interviews talking about his business acumen. But in the entertainment space, he's running it right now. He's probably one of the people that's doing the most, and he's doing it himself, plus producing stuff and having a behind-the-scenes role. So, for sure, inspirational in the entertainment space.
All right, so my quote, I think you're going to like it a lot. It has to go back to our delegation, and here's the quote. I don't have a problem with delegation. I love to delegate. I'm either lazy enough or busy enough or trusting enough or congenial enough that the notion of leaving tasks in someone else's lap doesn't just sound wise to me, it sounds attractive.
Who is this?
John Ortberg. He's a Christian author, but right along the lines of what we were saying.
Yeah, and you
have to find a way where it's just like, this isn't, oh, I'll give it to this person. It's like, I have to. This sounds very attractive to me.
The 2 projects that I can think of where I was the most successful at delegation was National Geographic,
Yeah.
when I had my first EO meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and Clio had to run it. And then it was like, okay, nothing burned to the ground. Client's happy, cool.
Well, Giants
amazing.
with Giants too. We both weren't there on site too, and it went.
Yeah, but that one was like that felt more of like a,
Hand
okay, this is a decision that we're making. But we did that one, and then I can't remember what we were in the middle of when we had the Ashley I Hulu project.
Yeah.
But it was basically, you were like, I can't take this. So if we say yes, we're going to have to like figure it out. And I didn't want to say no.
What were we doing?
I don't remember.
It's not SAG. No.
I think it was. I think it was leading up to SAG. Anyway, Vanessa had to totally run it. So it's like I was going back and forth with
And
her.
it comes out
Our
better
sales
than you
guy
would've.
was still here, and
Right.
he wasn't really doing enough. And so Vanessa kind of took it and ran with it, and I was there. But it was like I didn't have the rundown. I was not in charge of that project. I'd sold it, and I was there to make sure if there was any emergencies and to pay for stuff. But those two back-to-back really got to me like it's better when I'm not involved. Because
Yeah.
I'm too busy, and there are certain people that are just more, especially for the Ashley I project, it was a better fit for Vanessa. So those two were light bulb moments for me, and it was 100% not based on me making that decision, more of just too busy.
I love the lazy enough or busy enough because that's why I get back to where I struggle is like the feeling guilty because I feel like I'm being lazy. And I know it's silly, but just I have to get out of my own head. But it's true, like whether you're lazy enough or busy enough or trusting enough, whatever. Delegation is the name of the game. So
Love it.
there it is, episode 19. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes. Welcome back, Brett. Subscribe on iTunes. We are on YouTube. We're on Facebook Live. The whole deal.
We out you.
So make it happen. All right. See you guys next show.